Imagine a packed stadium, thousands of fans holding their breath as the clock ticks down. The score is tied, the pressure is immense, and one player has a single chance to change history. He shoots, and for a moment, the entire world stops. That is the magic of the FIFA World Cup, where passion, drama, and unforgettable moments come together on football's biggest stage. Welcome to Learn English Lab. In today's Advanced English podcast, we will travel through the rich history of the World Cup, explore the legends and matches that shaped the sport, and look ahead to the FIFA World Cup 2026, the biggest and most exciting tournament ever. Let's begin.
Man, that's quite the image to start with, isn't it?
Yeah, it really sets the scene.
It does, because, the sheer, suffocating weight of that single moment on the pitch, it's just amplified by the eyes of billions.
It really is. And, the goal of this deep dive for you listening right now isn't just to recite some dry list of sports statistics.
Right. Nobody wants just a Wikipedia timeline.
Exactly. We aren't going to just run through who won what and when. We're going way beyond the trophy lifts and the parades. We want to uncover the human resilience, the massive cultural shifts, and honestly, the advanced linguistic tools that are embedded in the history of this tournament.
Which is a crucial distinction to make right at the top.
For sure. Because we're going to look at how a simple game like literally 22 people kicking a sphere around a patch of grass somehow became a high-definition mirror for global society.
Yeah, we're looking at a true sociological phenomenon here.
Yeah.
We're talking about an event that has, on record, demonstrated the power to pause civil wars.
Which is wild to even think about.
It is. It can momentarily unite deeply fractured nations and, break the hearts of millions of people simultaneously across entirely different time zones. It's really an unparalleled shared experience.
So sit back, get comfortable, because we are going to unpack the stories that have made grown adults just weep in the stands. We're exploring how a local pastime transformed into the world's most powerful collective event.
Oh, I am ready for this.
Let's travel all the way back to the beginning. The year is 1928. Now, football was already a growing sport, right? Clubs existed, domestic leagues were running, and the sport had even made some somewhat clunky appearances at the Olympic Games.
Yeah, they were definitely playing it, but it wasn't what it is today.
Right. There was no global stage. There was no single mountaintop for the sport itself. Okay, let's unpack this. Trying to organize a massive global tournament in the 1920s was like trying to coordinate a worldwide diplomatic summit today, but using only snail mail, telegraphs, and steamships.
Oh, it sounds like an absolute logistical nightmare. A monumental undertaking, really.
Totally.
And you have to, understand the geopolitical temperature of the world in 1928 to get why. The globe was still reeling from the devastating aftershocks of the First World War.
Everything was still so fragile.
Very fragile. Borders had been redrawn, economies were barely holding on, and international travel was, it was incredibly slow, prohibitively expensive, and honestly, often physically dangerous.
So throwing a global sports party was not high on the priority list.
Definitely not. The idea that you could gather the best athletic teams from every corner of the globe into one host nation was considered by many reasonable people to be like a complete fantasy, a fool's errand.
But this is where Jules Rimet enters the chat, right?
Right. He was the president of FIFA at the time, and he just possessed this unwavering, almost obsessive vision. He firmly believed that football possessed a unique power to cut through all of that post-war animosity.
To kind of transcend the physical borders and language barriers?
Yeah, to exist in a space entirely above global politics.
I love that concept, the pitch as a neutral zone, a 100-yard rectangle where the outside world just doesn't matter.
It's a beautiful idea. And he pushed and negotiated tirelessly until the governing body finally agreed to his dream.
And that dream materialized in 1930, the very first tournament. But I have to stop and ask here, why Uruguay?
It's a great question.
Right. Of all the places in the world, why choose a small South American nation to host this massive, highly risky new experiment? If logistics were already a nightmare, why not host it in Central Europe where a bunch of nations could just take a train?
What's fascinating here is the intersection of historical timing and just undeniable sporting excellence. Uruguay wasn't chosen randomly at all.
It had a reason for it.
Two very specific reasons, actually. First, 1930 marked the 100-year anniversary of their independence.
Oh, okay. So it was a massive party anyway.
Exactly. The entire country was already mobilizing for a huge national celebration. They were willing to pour resources into building a colossal stadium. the Estadio Centenario, specifically for this event.
Wow.
And second, and perhaps more importantly, they were undeniably the best football team in the world at that time.
Were they?
Oh, yeah. They had won gold medals at the 1924 and 1928 Olympic Games, absolutely dazzling European crowds with this style of passing football that most Northern Hemisphere teams had never even seen before.
So they had the pedigree. It seemed like the perfect stage to legitimize this new competition.
Spot on. They were the reigning kings of the sport.
But like getting to that stage, I mean, we complain today about a 3-hour layover at an airport with free Wi-Fi, you know?
Right.
Imagine being a European player in 1930. 13 teams eventually made the journey, but for the European squads like France, Belgium, Romania, and Yugoslavia, it involved boarding a ship and sailing across the Atlantic Ocean for 2 entire weeks.
It's just wild to think about.
They were literally doing calisthenics, running laps around the smokestacks on the wooden deck of a boat, just trying to keep their muscles from atrophying while crossing the ocean.
It completely reframes our modern understanding of athletic preparation, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, the sheer dedication required just to show up is staggering.
Yeah.
The physical toll of a 2-week sea voyage, dealing with seasickness, poor diet, the inability to properly train followed immediately by a high-stakes athletic competition in a foreign climate.
Yeah. That's hard to fathom today when players travel with sleep specialists and personal nutritionists on private jets.
It's a different universe entirely.
And the result of all that monumental effort, the host nation, Uruguay, won that inaugural tournament. They beat Argentina 4-2 in the final.
And that inaugural victory just set the streets of Montevideo on fire. People poured out of their homes, dancing through the entire night.
Because it wasn't just a sports win, it was the ultimate validation of their young nation on a brand new, highly visible world stage. It proved they belonged.
Absolutely. A new chapter in world sport had officially begun. The concept was proven. Romet's impossible dream, the logistical nightmare, it had actually worked.
But as we know with any sweeping historical narrative, the momentum didn't last uninterrupted.
No, history intervened in the most brutal way possible.
Right. The momentum crashed headfirst into the catastrophic reality of the Second World War.
The tournament was completely canceled in 1942 and 1946.
The world was utterly shattered, governments were focused entirely on survival, and societies were recovering from unimaginable trauma. Football just had to wait.
The grass grew long on the pitches, literally.
Yeah. It wasn't until 1950 that the competition finally resumed, and the host was Brazil. And this leads us to one of the most stunning, psychologically fascinating moments in sports history.
Oh, the 1950 final match. It is etched permanently into the cultural soul of Brazil.
Tell me about the setup for that, because it sounds intense.
Oh, it was beyond intense. The match was played in Rio de Janeiro, inside the newly constructed Maracana Stadium, in front of a crowd that is almost unimaginable by today's safety standards.
Like how many people?
Estimated at nearly 200,000 people.
200,000.
Packed shoulder to shoulder. And Brazil was the heavy, undisputed favorite. They were the host nation, playing devastatingly beautiful, attacking football throughout the tournament.
And the format was slightly different then, right? Essentially a final group stage.
Yeah, meaning Brazil didn't even need to win the match. All they needed was a draw against Uruguay to lift the title on home soil.
The newspapers in Brazil had literally already punted the headlines declaring them champions. Songs had been written. Politicians had already given congratulatory speeches before the referee even blew the starting whistle.
They were that confident.
And then tiny Uruguay strikes again. They go down a goal, fight their way back, and score late in the second half to defeat Brazil 2-1.
The aftermath of that final whistle is legendary. And not for the celebration, but for the visceral reaction of the crowd.
Just dead silence, right?
A profound, suffocating silence fell over that massive concrete bowl. Almost 200,000 people. Completely, utterly speechless. You have to imagine the sheer acoustic weight of 200,000 humans suddenly losing their voices.
Yeah, it gives me chills.
In Brazil, it became known as the Maracanazo, the blow of the Maracana. To this day, it is considered one of the most emotionally devastating moments in all of football history. It created a national complex that haunted their footballing psyche for years.
But looking at it from Uruguay's perspective, flipping the lens for a second, it is the ultimate display of resilience.
Without a doubt.
I mean, they were walking into a coliseum that was literally built to serve as the venue for a Brazilian coronation.
Yeah.
The noise, the intimidation, the sheer arrogance of the entire setup, and they survived that psychological pressure cooker.
Not only survived, they thrived in it. They stuck to their tactical plan, absorbed the pressure, and struck when the opportunity presented itself.
Football suddenly became this incredible arena where underdogs could prove they belonged, where grit and mental fortitude could overcome pure talent in overwhelming numbers.
It established a narrative thread that still defines the tournament today. The deeply held idea that on any given day, 11 players from a small nation executing a perfect tactical plan with unyielding belief can humble a global superpower. That resilience is the beating heart of the game.
So those rough, chaotic early years proved that the tournament could survive global war, it could survive impossible logistical nightmares, and it could produce unbelievable, unscripted drama. But the decades that followed proved something entirely different. They proved that this tournament could create literal gods among men.
Indeed. We enter the era where individual brilliance began to define the global perception of the sport. The structural stage was finally set, the lights were turned on, and now the generational actors arrived.
Let's jump to 1958, Sweden. The arrival of a player who would fundamentally change the geometry of how football was played and how it was marketed.
A 17-year-old boy from Brazil named Pelé.
Barely old enough to vote, barely old enough to drive, yet he stepped onto the pitch with an elegance and a ruthless efficiency that defied all logical explanation.
Pelé was a true phenomenon. It wasn't just that he was young, it was the way he processed visual information on the pitch.
Like a chess master.
Exactly. No one had ever seen a teenager map the game with such advanced tactical intelligence combined with explosive physical brilliance. He was playing 3 moves ahead of seasoned, veteran defenders. He understood angles, space, and the physics of the ball in a way that seems almost supernatural.
He scored 6 goals in that tournament, including 2 in the final.
Just staggering stats for a kid.
And I want to talk about the image of him when the final whistle blew in that 58 final. This kid, who had just systematically dismantled the Swedish defense, just collapses on the pitch, weeping openly as his older teammates rush over to carry him on their shoulders.
It's such a raw, vulnerable moment.
It really was. It wasn't just the birth of a star, it was the birth of the first truly global superstar of the television age.
And it was a psychologically necessary moment for Brazil, too. Remember the collective trauma of the Maracanazo in 1950 we just discussed?
Oh, right. The wound was still open.
Very much so. The nation had been questioning its footballing identity. Pelé and that remarkable 1958 team brought ultimate redemption. They exorcised the ghosts of the Maracana. They healed a national psychological wound through their sheer, undeniable brilliance.
Then we roll into the swinging 60s, 1966. The World Cup goes to England, one of the self-proclaimed birthplaces of the modern game. And the host nation actually lifts the trophy at the old Wembley Stadium. Geoff Hurst scores a hat-trick in the final against West Germany, the only hat-trick ever scored in a World Cup final until very recently.
A massive moment for English football.
And the legacy of that 1966 team is still felt today, almost to a suffocating degree for modern English players. English fans still sing songs about that summer. The media constantly references the spirit of '66. It left a permanent, indelible mark on their cultural identity.
It did. But as we explore these towering figures and these legendary victories, we have to acknowledge the inherent duality of the sport. Football is an arena of incredible, often harsh contrasts. For every legacy of triumph like England in '66, there is an equal and sometimes more compelling legacy of heartbreak.
Which makes me want to push back on a concept for a second, a phrase we hear all the time. We always talk about football as the beautiful game, but does the most beautiful football actually always win? Is there a direct correlation between aesthetic brilliance and lifting the trophy?
That is the eternal raging debate in football philosophy. And the history of the World Cup provides a definitive, sometimes brutal answer: no. The most beautiful football absolutely does not always win.
It doesn't.
Not at all. And that is exactly where the cruelty of the sport reveals itself. It's a low-scoring game, which means chance, luck, and defensive pragmatism can easily overturn artistic superiority.
Give me an example of that.
Let's contrast 2 legendary Brazilian teams to illustrate this perfectly. First, the 1970 squad featuring Pelé in his final tournament alongside Jairzinho, Rivellino, and Carlos Alberto.
Oh, they're iconic.
They are widely considered the greatest national team ever assembled. They play free, creative, breathtakingly beautiful attacking football, and they won the tournament flawlessly in Mexico. They destroyed Italy in the final. In that instance, beautiful football triumphed, absolutely.
Right, that's the dream scenario. The artists win the war. The canvas is perfect.
But then, fast forward and look at the 1982 World Cup in Spain. Brazil brought a team that was, by many accounts, perhaps even more artistic than the 1970 squad. Oh yes, a team full of absolute midfield maestro Zico, Socrates, Falcão. They played a style of football that looked like a highly choreographed improvisational dance. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to entertain, to express joy through the ball. It was mesmerizing to watch.
And yet they didn't win.
No, they were eliminated in the second group stage.
By Italy, right?
Yes. A moment of clinical, devastating, unapologetic pragmatism from Italy, spearheaded by Paolo Rossi's hat-trick, shattered the Brazilian dream. Italy didn't care about art, they cared about exploiting space and punishing mistakes.
Yeah.
That 1982 match perfectly encapsulates the cruelty of football. You can play the most beautiful, intricate game in the world, you can dominate possession, you can hit the crossbar 3 times, and one mistake, one ruthless, lightning-fast counterattack can send you packing. The artists were sent home by the assassins.
It's heartbreaking, but it's why we can't look away. The tension between art and pragmatism is addictive. And speaking of being utterly unable to look away, here's where it gets really interesting. 1986, Mexico, a tournament that belongs entirely, almost obsessively, to one single man, Diego Maradona.
Ah, the Argentine genius. What Maradona achieved in 1986 is still analyzed, fiercely debated, and marveled at by tacticians today.
It was unparalleled.
In a sport that was becoming increasingly systematized and defensive, he delivered what is arguably the most compelling, singular individual performance in the history of a team sport.
We absolutely have to break down that quarterfinal match against England, because to me, it is the ultimate display of the duality we were just talking about. The angel and the devil in the span of like 5 minutes. He scores 2 goals that are complete ideological opposites.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's talk about the first one. It is entirely illegal. The ball loops up into the penalty area. England's goalkeeper Peter Shilton comes out to punch it, and Maradona, who is half a foot shorter, jumps up and literally punches the ball into the net with his left fist.
And the referee completely misses it.
The referee misses the handball, the goal stands, and Maradona later famously, almost mischievously, calls it the hand of God.
It is the dictionary definition of controversial. A moment that caused, and still causes, intense, bitter disagreement. To the English players and fans, it was a cynical, unforgivable cheat that robbed them of a semifinal spot.
Which is completely understandable.
But to the Argentines, however, especially given the geopolitical backdrop of the Falklands War just 4 years prior, it was seen as a clever, justified act of street-smart rebellion. It was the ultimate pickpocketing of a traditional rival.
But then, just 4 minutes later in the exact same match, he scores the second goal. And this one, there is no controversy. There is only awe.
The goal of the century.
Universally voted the greatest goal ever scored in the history of the sport. He picks up the ball deep in his own half, pirouettes away from 2 midfielders, and then proceeds to dribble past 5 English players and the goalkeeper, covering 60 meters of the pitch in exactly 11 seconds. He looks like a ghost weaving through heavy concrete statues. The ball seems glued to his boot.
That single historic match perfectly captures the chaotic essence of Diego Maradona, the street urchin trickery, and the undeniable otherworldly genius housed within the exact same player, separated by mere minutes of the clock.
It's mind-blowing.
He embodied the flawed, brilliant, deeply controversial nature of the human condition, all played out on a sun-drenched grass field in Mexico City.
And the psychological burden of carrying that kind of greatness, of being the focal point for an entire nation's hopes, is incredibly heavy. Which brings us to 1994, the World Cup in the United States.
Another pivotal, heartbreaking moment.
The final is between Brazil and Italy, played in the blistering heat of the Rose Bowl in California. And for the first time ever, after 120 minutes of exhausting, scoreless football, the World Cup final goes to a penalty shootout. Roberto Baggio, the absolute star of the Italian team, the man who had practically dragged them to the final single-handedly with crucial late goals, he steps up to take the decisive penalty.
The mathematics were brutal. He had to score to keep Italy in the tournament. If he missed, Brazil won. The entire weight of a football-obsessed nation was resting on his shoulders in that isolated, lonely walk from the center circle to the penalty spot.
And he misses. He leans back slightly, strikes under the ball, and launches it high over the crossbar into the California sky.
Agonizing.
The image of that moment is so incredibly visceral. Baggio just standing there alone in the penalty box, his head bowed, his hands on his hips, his famous ponytail falling forward, while the Brazilian goalkeeper Tafarel drops to his knees in celebration behind him. It's an image of profound, total isolation.
It is a stark, unforgiving reminder of football's most brutal truth. The World Cup magnifies everything through a massive global lens. It magnifies the triumphs, turning players into immortals, but it intensely, painfully magnifies the failures.
Yeah, nobody forgets a miss like that.
Exactly. Even the absolute greatest players, the ones who seem invincible and technically flawless, can break under the immense, crushing psychological pressure of that singular moment. Beneath the talent and the fame, they are fragile, fallible humans.
It's agonizing to watch, even decades later. You feel the knot in his stomach. But while individual players like Baggio break our hearts, and players like Maradona leave us speechless with their audacity, entire nations use these massive moments to forge their own identities. The tournament becomes a mirror reflecting society back at itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's vital to understand that the World Cup never exists in a vacuum. It isn't just a sports bubble. It is deeply intertwined with global history, domestic policy, and complex geopolitics.
The outside world definitely bleeds in.
The host nations, the political climates of the eras, the social struggles, they all bleed directly onto the pitch.
Let's unpack some of those reflections, because sometimes the mirror is quite dark. Take 1978 in Argentina, for example.
That is a prime, highly studied example. Argentina hosted the tournament while the country was under the brutal rule of a military dictatorship. The junta, led by Jorge Rafael Videla.
And as we discuss this, I want to be clear to you listening that we aren't taking any political sides here. We are just imparting what the historical source material outlines regarding this era.
Right, purely reporting the context. The atmosphere surrounding the tournament was incredibly tense, wrapped in severe political controversy and international boycotts.
It was a very dark time.
The tournament was blatantly used as a propaganda tool by the regime to project an image of stability and national strength to the world, while horrific human rights abuses were occurring just blocks from the stadiums.
It's terrifying to juxtapose those two things.
Yet simultaneously, the raw, authentic passion of the Argentine fans and the ultimate victory of their team created a very complex, deeply layered historical event. For the citizens, the victory was a moment of genuine, desperate joy in a time of terror. We must observe the history impartially, but we cannot separate the confetti on the pitch from the political reality of the country outside the stadium walls.
Or look at 1990 in Italy. West Germany wins the tournament, beating Maradona's Argentina in the final. But look at the calendar. This is happening just as the Berlin Wall has fallen, and East and West Germany are in the complex emotional process of reunification.
The timing was incredible.
The victory of the West German team took on a weight far heavier than just a sports trophy. It felt like a powerful, unifying symbol of a new era, a new singular identity for a fractured nation. And then, jumping forward to 2010, South Africa.
A profoundly significant milestone. The first World Cup ever held on the African continent. This was a nation consciously using the tournament to showcase its massive transformations, rebirth, after the dark, oppressive, internationally isolating decades of apartheid.
And the cultural impact of that month was massive. Everyone who watched it remembers the defining sound of that tournament, the vuvuzela.
Oh, you couldn't escape it.
That distinctive, continuous, buzzing plastic horn filled every single stadium and was broadcast into billions of living rooms globally. Spain won their first title that year, playing their intricate tiki-taka style, but the tournament itself was ultimately a triumph of South African identity, organizational capability, and global inclusion.
It's amazing how a team's victory, or even just a nation's hosting, can mean so much more than the final scoreline.
Look at France in 1998. They host the tournament and they battle their way to the final against a heavily favored Brazilian team. Zinedine Zidane, this elegant, quiet maestro of Algerian French descent, playing in front of his home fans in Paris, scores 2 brilliant headers to win the game.
That 1998 French team was extraordinary, not just for their tactical skill or defensive solidity, but for what they culturally represented to the nation.
They were called the Black Blanc Bleu team, right?
Yeah. Yes. Black, white, and Arab. They were a squad composed of players from highly diverse backgrounds, immigrants, and the children of former colonies. When they lifted that trophy, and Zidane's face was projected onto the Arc de Triomphe, It was celebrated as a profound symbol of modern national unity.
It really brought everyone together.
For a brief, shining moment, that team represented a vision of belonging, integration, and a shared modern French identity that transcended the bounds of sport and pushed back against rising political divisions.
But, the emotional stakes of this shared experience, they can swing wildly the other way, too. Sometimes the collective experience isn't unity and triumph, but unity and sheer, unadulterated shock. Which brings us to a match that still feels like a fever dream, the 2014 semifinal.
Belo Horizonte. Brazil hosting the tournament again, carrying the immense pressure of hoping to finally, definitively exorcise the ghosts of the 1950 Maracanazo we talked about earlier. The entire country expects a victory.
And instead, they run into a flawless, ruthlessly efficient German tactical machine. Germany destroys Brazil 7-1 on Brazilian soil in a World Cup semifinal.
It was stunning.
I remember watching it and thinking my television feed was broken. How does a team with Brazil's pedigree give up 4 goals in the span of, 6 minutes?
It was quite literally unprecedented. For a footballing superpower like Brazil to be dismantled so thoroughly, so quickly, in their own home, it defied all statistical probability. Tactically, it was a masterclass in exploiting emotional indiscipline.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Brazil, missing their star Neymar and captain Thiago Silva, came out playing entirely on emotion, pressing wildly, fueled by the frenzied crowd. Germany, particularly players like Toni Kroos and Thomas Müller, stayed incredibly composed.
They didn't let the crowd get to them.
Not at all. They bypassed Brazil's chaotic midfield press with simple, precise passing triangles. Once the first goal went in, Brazil panicked. Their midfield, particularly Fernandinho, abandoned their defensive positions to chase the game, leaving massive, gaping holes in the center of the pitch. Germany didn't play emotionally, they played geometrically.
Wow.
They ruthlessly exploited those open spaces, passing the ball into the net with terrifying critical precision.
And the cameras panning the crowd captured something far deeper than just sports sadness. It was a collective trauma playing out in high definition. Shock, disbelief, grown men holding replica trophies, just weeping uncontrollably. A very specific kind of national grief.
It was the modern Maracanazo, unfolding live for billions to dissect.
But amidst that horrific footballing trauma for Brazil, there's a detail from the source material that I find incredibly moving. A small moment of light in the dark. After the game, amidst all the tears and the boos, there's this photograph taken in the stand.
Yes, I know the one.
It shows a group of German fans wearing their jerseys and a group of Brazilian fans standing together. The German fans have their arms around the Brazilians, and they are actually laughing together, sharing a moment of genuine human connection over a beer.
That image is the very definition of empathy in action. Empathy requires stepping outside of your own experience, in this case, the euphoria of a historic German win, to understand and share the devastation of the person next to you.
It's so powerful.
Even in the face of an unprecedented sporting humiliation, the environment of the tournament had the power to transcend the immediate pain of the 7-1 scoreline. Those fans, separated by language, by culture, and by the brutally one-sided result on the pitch, found a way to connect over their collective humanity.
It proves that beneath the tribal rivalry of international sports, there is a deep, shared appreciation for the experience itself. A mutual understanding that today it is your heartbreaking, but 4 years from now, it could easily be mine.
Beautifully said.
But to facilitate these massive global moments, as the emotional stakes of the game grew so massively, the actual mechanics of the sport, how it was tactically played, how it was officiated, how it was broadcast to billions, had to evolve at a breakneck pace to keep up.
Absolutely. We cannot separate the emotional history from the tactical history. The game on the pitch in 1930, with players essentially jogging in straight lines, looks fundamentally different, almost like a different sport entirely, from the high-speed chess match played today. We have to look at the tactical and technological revolution that reshaped football.
Right, let's contrast the eras. Early football, from what I gather in the sources, was pretty raw and heavily rigidly structured. It was physical, direct. You had formations like the WM. Basically, you run straight, you kick the ball hard. If you're a defender, you stay in your exact zone, you try to win the ball back, and you boot it as far away up the pitch as possible. It sounds almost unimaginative.
It was a much more rigid, compartmentalized game. Players had defined strict zones, and they really strayed from them. A left back was a left back. They did not cross the halfway line. Makes sense for the time. But in the 1950s, with the Hungarians, and then moving into the 1960s, a massive intellectual shift occurred. coaches began treating the pitch like a dynamic chessboard rather than a static battlefield. They introduced the concept of pressing, where the entire team works together as a cohesive unit to chase the ball and close down space aggressively, rather than just individuals passively defending their own specific zones.
So everyone had to be involved.
Exactly. Player positioning became much more fluid. The role of the central midfielder, the intelligent player who links the defense to the attack and controls the tempo of the game, became absolutely paramount.
And that tactical evolution reaches an absolute mind-bending peak in the 1970s with the Netherlands. This is where we get the famous philosophy of total football. I always think of total football like a Rubik's Cube, where the colors are constantly shifting, but the cube itself never loses its shape.
That is an excellent analogy. Total football, inspired largely by the tactical vision of coach Rinus Michels and the on-pitch genius of Johan Cruyff, was genuinely revolutionary.
What made it so different?
The core, radical idea was that any outfield player could seamlessly, instinctively take over the role of any other player on the pitch. If a defender saw an opening and moved forward to attack, a midfielder or an attacker would immediately drop back to cover the vacated defensive space. The team shape was maintained, but the personnel constantly rotated.
It sounds incredibly demanding.
It required supreme technical skill from every single player. Your center back had to be able to pass like a playmaker. It required incredible spatial awareness, constantly scanning the field to understand where the gaps were. And it required supreme, almost grueling physical fitness to constantly swap positions.
It must have exhausted them.
Oh, absolutely. It also relied heavily on the aggressive use of the offside trap, squeezing the space the opponent had to play in. It completely broke the mold of rigid positioning and permanently changed how football was conceptualized and taught globally. Every modern system today, from Pep Guardiola's positional play to Jurgen Klopp's heavy metal pressing, contains the DNA of total football.
So what does this all mean for the modern game? We have these incredibly complex, physically demanding tactical systems, but we also have something Jules Rimet could never, in his wildest dreams, have imagined in 1928, a massive billions of dollars injection of modern technology.
The technology has fundamentally altered the fabric of the game, both for the players and the spectators. The most prominent and heavily debated example is VAR, the video assistant referee, introduced comprehensively in recent World Cups.
Whoa, VAR!
Yeah, suddenly a referee sprinting on the pitch isn't relying solely on their own human fallible eyes. They have an entire team of analysts sitting in a remote, darkened control room, watching dozens of high-definition camera angles, checking offside calls down to the millimeter using 3D line drawing software, and reviewing penalty box fouls in extreme slow motion.
And just like Maradona's hand, VAR has brought its own distinct flavor of modern controversy. It's almost like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle of sports. The closer you look at a foul in slow motion, the less clear the original intent becomes.
That's a great way to put it.
Some fans absolutely love the accuracy. They want the right, mathematically correct call made every single time to ensure fairness. But others absolutely hate it. They feel it strips the soul and the spontaneity out of the game, that the pure, primal joy of celebrating a goal is ruined because you have to wait 2 agonizing minutes for an earpiece check to see if a striker's left toenail was offside in the build-up.
Regardless of where you stand on the philosophical debate of accuracy versus flow, the reality is that VAR has fundamentally changed how crucial decisions are made and how fans experience the emotional arc of a match. You don't celebrate immediately anymore, you celebrate tentatively. And the technological revolution extends far beyond just the refereeing. Look at the sheer architectural infrastructure of the modern tournament.
The stadiums themselves are like spaceships. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar featured stadiums built in the middle of the desert with massive complex air conditioning systems pushing precisely chilled air directly onto the pitch and into individual vents under the fan seats. It's an absolute engineering marvel just to make the environment playable.
It is a stark contrast. We have moved from fans standing on muddy grassy banks in the 1930s, squinting to see a heavy leather ball, to acoustic marvels designed specifically to amplify crowd noise, with perfectly manicured hybrid grass pitches, optimized for the visual spectacle of billions of viewers watching on high-definition screens.
Billions. Let's pause on that number for a second. In the 1950s, only local fans in the stadium or people listening to crackling radio broadcasts could really experience the games. By the 1980s and 90s, satellite TV started beaming it live around the world, creating global superstars. Today, You have streaming platforms sending multi-angle replay highlights to smartphones in Tokyo, Lagos, and New York within 10 seconds of a goal crossing the line. It is the most widely consumed entertainment property in human history.
It highlights the truly global, interconnected nature of the sport. And with that unparalleled global reach comes a staggering, almost incomprehensible commercial reality. The World Cup is a multi-billion-dollar multinational industry. The logistics, the corporate sponsorships, the fierce bidding wars for broadcast rights, the economic scale is dizzying.
And because of that scale, the players are no longer just athletes running around in shorts. Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, Kylian Mbappe, they are towering cultural icons. They are brands. They are recognized from remote rural villages to massive urban metropolises. But all of this history, the emotional baggage of past tournaments, the intricate tactical evolution, and this massive, hyper-connected global infrastructure, it has all been building toward one specific, unprecedented event on the horizon.
We are turning the page to a completely new chapter in the history of the tournament, the FIFA World Cup 2026.
Let's talk about 2026, because everything we've discussed so far, even the massive tournaments in Brazil and Russia, seems almost quaint compared to what's coming. We are looking at a tournament without borders. For the first time ever, 3 massive countries are co-hosting: the United States, Canada, and Mexico. They are spreading this event across entire time zones, across an entire continent.
It is a monumental structural change. And it's not just the vast geography that is expanding, it is the core structure of the tournament itself. The field of competitors is growing from the traditional, highly competitive 32 teams to a sprawling 48 teams.
Now wait, let me push back on this a bit. I hear traditional football purists arguing about this all the time on sports radio and forums. If we let 48 teams in, don't we seriously risk watering down the quality of the matches? Aren't we going to see way more unbalanced, one-sided games in the group stages? Instead of heavyweights clashing early, we might get absolute blowouts that bore the neutral viewer.
It is a completely valid concern, and the tactical purists make a fair point regarding the concentration of elite talent. Diluting the pool means you will inevitably have wider disparities in quality between the top seeds and the lowest seeds. However, you have to look at the powerful, culturally vital counterargument. Expanding to 48 teams finally provides more qualification slots to federations in Africa, Asia, and smaller regions like Oceania that have historically been severely underrepresented due to the European and South American dominance of the qualification spots. It fulfills the ultimate aspiration, the deep generational hope and dream of nations that consider just hearing their national anthem played at a World Cup to be their greatest historical sporting achievement.
I see.
The inclusion drives immense anticipation and grassroots development worldwide. It democratizes the dream of participation.
It brings more stories to the table, more distinct styles of play, more underdogs. And we know from Uruguay in 1950 that underdogs and their resilience are the absolute lifeblood of this tournament's mythology. We are also going to witness a massive, highly visible passing of the torch in 2026.
The generational shift on the pitch will be stark and undeniable.
You've got this new generation of young, fearless stars who will be entering their physical prime. Players like Jude Bellingham from England, pulling the strings in midfield. Pedri and the absolute teenage sensation Lamine Yamal from Spain. Florian Wirtz for Germany. The young striker Endrick for Brazil. These kids are incredible. They play with a speed and a tactical maturity that is terrifying.
And they will be stepping firmly into the global spotlight, just as the fading legends, the Messis, the Ronaldos, the Modrics, the players who have entirely defined the narrative of the sport for the last 2 decades, are likely taking their final, slow bows on the world stage. The narrative arc of the hungry young phenom replacing the revered veteran master is as old as storytelling itself, and it will play out live in 2026.
We also have to look at the ambitions of the host nations themselves, specifically the United States. They have poured enormous, calculated investment into their domestic league, MLS, over the last 20 to 30 years. They've built state-of-the-art youth academies. They are actively exporting talented players to top clubs in Europe. They have genuine, serious footballing ambition now. Hosting the tournament in 2026 isn't just a fun marketing exercise for them like it arguably was in 1994. It's a loud statement of intent that they want to sit permanently at the big table with the traditional footballing powers.
This raises an important question about the weight of history meeting modern ambition. While the U.S. and Canada are busy building new infrastructure and new traditions, Mexico is returning to host for a record 3rd time. They are bringing deep, established footballing ghosts to this modern party.
The Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. The cavernous, intimidating Azteca.
Exactly. The Azteca is truly iconic. It is widely recognized as a living temple of World Cup history. This is the very stadium where Pelé won his final glorious World Cup in 1970. This is the exact same pitch where Diego Maradona scored both the controversial hand of God and the mesmerizing goal of the century in 1986.
It's sacred ground.
It is. The fact that modern, hyper-athletic players in 2026 will be running on the same grass, echoing the ghosts of past legends, adds a deeply poetic, historical layer to this massive North American expansion.
It's incredible how the past and the future are going to physically collide in these stadiums. But, as we look at all these international stories, the complex tactics born in Amsterdam, the broadcast beam from Qatar, the passionate fans watching in pubs in Tokyo, cafes and Legos and squares in Madrid, there is a fascinating, almost hidden thread running through all of it, a specific tool used to share these diverse moments with the entire world.
You are talking about the overarching language of the game itself, the medium through which the message is delivered.
Yes. Let's pull back the curtain a bit and reveal an interesting meta layer to this deep dive. The language of modern football commentary, of international sports journalism, of the global tactical analysis we all consume on YouTube or in articles, it is overwhelmingly, predominantly English.
It is a vital, often overlooked sociolinguistic point. Due to the historical roots of the game in England, combined with the massive global reach of the English Premier League and the dominance of English-language sports media networks, English has essentially become the operational lingua franca of global football.
It's the default language.
Yes. When a player from Japan or Senegal transfers to a club in Germany, and they speak in a post-match press conference to a worldwide audience, they almost always default to English to ensure maximum comprehension. When highly produced, behind-the-scenes football documentaries are released for international streaming platforms, the primary narration and the subtitled translations are geared toward English.
And this has a massive practical application for you, the listener. By consuming high-level football content, whether it's tactical podcasts, detailed match reports in broadsheet newspapers, or deep-dive documentaries, you aren't just passively enjoying a sport, you are actively, organically training your brain to become more articulate. You are immersing yourself in high-stakes communication.
To be articulate means you possess the ability to express complex thoughts, nuanced emotions, and detailed strategies clearly and effectively. The vocabulary naturally generated in high-level football analysis is remarkably sophisticated because the game itself is sophisticated, and the emotions it generates are extreme.
Think about the concepts we've naturally unpacked today just by telling the story of the tournament. Words drawn directly from the narratives of these matches. Phenomenon, legacy, controversial, unprecedented, resilience, empathy. These aren't just narrow sports words used only for kicking a ball. These are the exact high-level lexical tools you need to construct a persuasive argument in an IELTS exam, to write a compelling TOEFL essay, to defend a university dissertation, or to navigate a complex, high-stakes professional business negotiation.
Furthermore, listening to live match commentary trains your ear to the natural rhythm, the varied pacing, and the emotional cadence of the language. It exposes you to idiomatic expressions used dynamically in high-pressure, unscripted contexts. Engaging with the sport in English builds remarkable conversational fluency.
It builds that confidence.
Right. Fluency isn't just knowing vocabulary. It is the ability to retrieve and use a language smoothly, instinctively, and naturally, without constantly pausing to manually translate concepts in your head.
It essentially turns the World Cup and the culture surrounding it into the ultimate, most entertaining classroom on Earth. You are learning the intricacies of human psychology, the mechanics of teamwork, and the sweep of global history, all while absorbing advanced English vocabulary in its most natural, passionate, and memorable context.
It functions as a highly effective, deeply immersive learning environment because your brain is engaged by the narrative drama, making the linguistic retention much stronger.
Which brings us beautifully back to where we started our journey today. I want you to go back to that image from the opening, the packed, echoing stadium, the clock ticking down the final seconds, the profound silence before the strike. The history of this tournament, the way it survived world wars, the way it launched skinny teenagers into global legends, the way it crushed the spirits of heavily favored super teams, the way it broke the hearts of entire nations only to rebuild them 4 years later. It is fundamentally a story of human perseverance.
Perseverance. Continuing to try, continuing to push forward, meticulously rebuilding tactics and squad morale. Even when the obstacles, whether they are a devastating 7-1 loss or an agonizing missed penalty, seem utterly insurmountable.
It's about not giving up.
The teams that refuse to stop believing in their systems. The fans who return to the stadiums every 4 years, despite previous heartbreak, painting their faces and singing their songs. That unyielding hope is the true essence of the game.
Beneath the billions of dollars in broadcast rights, beneath the impossibly complex tactical pressing systems and the millimeter-perfect VAR monitors, beneath the massive corporate sponsorships, this sport endures and grows because it touches on something deeply, undeniably human.
It creates profound emotional connections that bypass logic. Profound meaning, it has deep significance. It touches the very core of our shared experience. The World Cup proves that despite our myriad political, cultural, and linguistic differences, we all share a deep, primal desire to compete, to find a sense of belonging with strangers wearing the same colors, and to feel incredibly, intensely alive in a massive shared moment.
It's the messy, beautiful, controversial story of us, played out on a perfectly manicured grass rectangle. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as we look toward the future. We've seen how football is a mirror that inevitably reflects the political and social realities of its time, from the tension of 1978 Argentina to the joyous post-apartheid rebirth of 2010 South Africa. So, when the massive, interconnected 48-team tournament kicks off across the entire North American continent in 2026, what will that sprawling, interconnected tournament reveal about who we are as a global society today?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? It is the question we will all be watching, analyzing, and waiting to see answered when the first whistle blows.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the history, the tactics, and the language of the beautiful game. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.